Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learn Plus. My name is Brenda Bailey Hughes, and I have the pleasure and the joy of sharing tips with you each month, a new skill that's going to help you in your career, in your workplace. And then this is the Learn Plus, the plus of Learn Plus is one tip in case you are a training consultant, an L&D professional, or a coach that might need to train others on how to use the skill that we learned together today. So welcome, everybody. So glad that you're here. Maybe in the comments, you can tell us where you are joining us from today. I'm in the Midwestern part of the United States, about 4 hours south of Chicago, in a beautiful little university town called Bloomington, Indiana. And the sun is shining, and it's cold, but the sun is shining, so we will take it. We've got Shelby online with us. Shelby's actually backstage. She's our producer, and all things technical run through Shelby. Jay is here. Always so good to see you, Jay. So glad you're here. And Shelby's coming in from Tennessee, a couple states south of where I am, and it's sunshiny in Tennessee today too. That's great. And Jay, of course, is coming in from Italy. We have people from Miriam. Thank you. So glad to see you from Tunisia. How are you? Hope you're well. Jody's from San Antonio. We've got Argentina in the house. This is great. I love it. You guys keep filling in where you're from so you can kind of meet people that are in the room with us today. And I'll get started on the direction we're going to head. Some of you who are regulars with me know that since January, I've been trying to focus on storytelling and different roles that storytelling can have in our lives, in our workplaces, some of the benefits of storytelling. We've gone through the 4 C's of storytelling. Last month, Dr. Daisy Lovelace joined me, and we talked about storytelling as a way to influence. And we're going to dig into that a little more deeply today. So thinking about how story can help us be influential. So maybe it would help you if you think about a few things on your plate right now at work where being influential matters, where you're going to have greater success if people get on board with your ideas. You're going to have greater success if people say yes to whatever your ask is. Have those in mind and see how the tips that we learned today might play out in those specific influential scenarios you have on your desk right now. So that's kind of the direction we are headed. We're going to start by taking a look at, and we can pull the PowerPoint up anytime that you want. We're going to take a look at first, this quote that I love about emotional appeal by Lou Gerstner. And for those of you who don't remember, Lou Gerstner was the former CEO of IBM. And it was in the 1990s when IBM was going through this really tumultuous time of change. And Lou Gerstner was largely credited for wrestling IBM out of the clutches of irrelevancy, because remember, they've made that fatal decision that laptops were just for fun and that connected kinds of computing was the wave of the future professionally. And of course, they missed that laptops and desktops did become the future of computing. And so they were playing catch up to other organizations. So Lou had to make some incredibly hard decisions. I say Lou like he and I are on a first name basis. I've never met Lou Gerstner, but people even called him like tough as nails Lou. And yet he knew that when we think about the 3 elements of good persuasion or good influence, which are ethos, credibility appeal, pathos, emotional appeal, and logos, logical appeal, of course, we need all 3 of those. But Lou was saying, let's not forget emotional appeal. Often when I talk to business-minded people, professionals like yourselves, they hop right on board with ethos. They're like, yep, credibility, that counts. Of course, we've got to be credible. We've got to be trustworthy. And they're also quick to agree with logos. Yes, of course, we have to have logic. We have to have evidence. We have to have data. We want that to drive our decisions and to help us be influential. But when I get to pathos or emotional appeal, people get a little squirmy. They're like, I don't know, not our business. We don't use emotions. But the reality is people do make decisions. Even the most business-minded of people, they make decisions with their heart, with their emotions. We rationalize those decisions with logic and with credibility, but they come to us largely out of emotion. So let's not forget the importance of emotion. And of course, Lou's great quote there about people need to buy in with their hearts and their bellies, not just their minds. So not that having our minds as a part of it is important, but we can't skip the emotional appeal. That quote, by the way, is from, if you put it in a larger context, he was saying change is not something you do by writing memos. Although I would argue that some memos can be pretty persuasive, but I know what he's saying. It's like, it's not about just the logical appeal. You've got to appeal to people's emotions. Oops, I'm just going crazy in my PowerPoint there. So if we were to ask Lou, how would you tell us to be emotionally appealing? I think he would remind us of these 3 steps. He would say, you got to tap common values. You've got to choose sticky language. We're going to focus on that one most today. And you have to show emotion. So that tapping common values, what I mean by that is that once you know what is motivating to the person who you need to influence, you want to align your idea, your ask, your recommendation to their values. So if I value convenience, keeping things easy, keeping things simple, and you know that you want to institute some new procedure, you want to emphasize, of course, how easy it's going to be. But maybe ease isn't my biggest motivator. It's customer satisfaction. I always worry about what our clients or customers are going to feel, what they're going to experience. I'm very customer driven. Well, then you want to show me how this idea that you have is going to drive a positive customer or client experience. So align to those values, and you can find people's values by listening to what they talk about a lot and what they use when they try to persuade or influence you. People often influence others or try to influence others in the way they themselves would be influenced. All right, so that's what I mean by tapping common values. Then choosing sticky language, we're going to come back to that one. Sticky language is a phrase that I've stolen from Dan and Chip Heath in their book, Made to Stick, a fun and easy read, by the way. They use this idea that we want our words, instead of them just falling off of people or just going in one ear and right out the other, they want our words, our messages to stick with people. And hence, they want us to use sticky language. In more traditional academic circles, you might know sticky language as rhetorical devices. And you may be having flashbacks to grammar school lessons and high school English classes. But rhetorical devices are powerful. They're influential. We tend to ignore them in the business setting, but ignore them at our peril because they can make us far more emotionally appealing. We'll talk about some of those here in a minute. I just want to touch on number 3 here. I think that Lou Gerstner would tell us, if you want to evoke emotion in others, you've got to show some emotion yourself. If I walk into a room and I'm presenting my idea and I'm just very flat and monotone and unsmiling, unexcited about the idea, how can I evoke an emotion in someone else if I'm not showing it myself? So show your own emotion to evoke the emotions of others. That's where we get those 3. Let's hop into the sticky language. I want to go through a couple of these for you, and then I'm going to ask you to maybe share which one you would try to use, or even make an attempt at using one of these. So for example, I asked you to think of your influential initiative or project or goal. Maybe it's that you want to get people to hire you. Maybe you're looking for a promotion. Maybe you have a conference you want to attend or some training you want to attend, and you want your department director to support you in that. You've got your idea in mind. Feel free to put that in the chat if you want to share what you're working on. Some of that might be a little confidential, but then think about, would a concrete example help you make your case that this is a great idea, whatever it is you're recommending? Would a concrete example in some way help evoke emotion in the people that are listening? So the one example that I have here on the screen is from an excerpt from a Nike shareholder report many years back. And it said, we sold our first shoes in China in 1984 when we placed 200 pairs in this little 50 square foot shop called the Friendship Store in Beijing. They sold out in 11 days. Today, the appetite for Nike products continues to grow. The brand is known and, more importantly, understood among many of the 500 million Chinese consumers under 25 years old. That's 1 billion feet that we're going after just as fast as we can. Now, I could summarize that whole paragraph by saying Nike has great brand recognition in China, right? That's basically what this says. But without that concreteness of 200 pairs of shoes in the little tiny pop-up store called the Friendship Shop, we miss that emotional connection that can be created through very concrete examples. So is there a concrete example that you could use related to your upcoming influential attempt? Vivid word choices are another one. So Steak and Shake is a regional restaurant. It was founded by Ed Kelly, who is the namesake of the Kelly School of Business where I teach. And so a lot of us at the Kelly School follow Steak and Shake's trajectory. And some years back, they were having a really rough time. They had to, the executive team made some pretty massive decisions without even consulting the board. The board was upset about this. And so in an emergency letter to shareholders and the board, the executive team said we had no time to waste because Steak and Shake was hemorrhaging losses to the discordant tune of almost $100,000 per day. So you've got that concrete example of $100,000 per day, but you also have this vivid word choice of hemorrhaging losses. When we think about what a hemorrhage looks like, it's someone that's bleeding out, and this organization was from a financial standpoint was bleeding out. Is there vivid words that you might be able to use for your influential experience, your influential effort that you have coming up? So you've got two of these rhetorical devices, these sticky language devices now to choose from: concrete examples and vivid word choice. Alliteration is another one. So alliteration is when we put several words in a phrase that all start with the same sound. So in this Warren Buffett example, we see him saying, we enjoy the process. So you hear that P-R-O sound, process, far more than the proceeds. Process, proceeds, the beginning of those words are similar. That's alliteration. And when we use alliterative language, it brings up that emotional appeal that we know we need to be successful from an influential standpoint. Could you use alliteration to win people over? Chiasmus, this is an interesting one. One of the most popular chiasmus examples is from John F. Kennedy's speech when he says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So what chiasmus is it's a phrase stated one way and then reversed and stated again. So here's one I learned when I was a young girl. Never let a fool kiss you. And here comes the flip, and never be fooled by a kiss. Okay, that's good wisdom, right? And it demonstrates chiasmus, a phrase said one way, then flipped to bring up this sort of emotionally evocative meaning. Do we use chiasmus in business? You bet. Here are a couple that Warren Buffett has been known to have said or have written. It's far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price, here comes the flip, than a fair company at a wonderful price. So you hear that reversal of the wording, and it kind of gives us an insight into Warren Buffett's investment strategy, or at least his acquisition strategy. And here's another one from him. on his investment strategy. We simply attempt to be fearful when others are greedy. Here comes the flip. And to be greedy when others are fearful. Probably some good investing advice from Warren Buffett right there. So that's chiasmus. Maybe you could use chiasmus to influence people. Rhythmic repetition is another one of these sticky language devices that you can use. Steve Jobs used it beautifully in lots of speeches, maybe most notably in his Macworld address clear back in 2007, when he used this phrase, we've got the iPad, blah, 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 blah. We've got the iPod Nanos. Does anybody even remember Nanos? We've got the amazing new iPod Shuffle, and that we've got the, just coming up again and again and again, created this rhythm or this parallelism to his language that people found very emotionally evocative. Can you use repetition? Now, make sure that you're not just repeating yourself. The sticky language has to be rhythmic to capture that repetition piece that we're looking for. If you're just saying the same thing over and over, but not in a sequenced sort of way, that's a little different than rhythmic repetition. That's just reiterative repetition, and especially with filler words. I've been noticing my students are all making their final speeches this week, and there's a lot of them that love the phrase "you guys," which I'm trying to encourage to get out of our vocabularies because it's not very gender inclusive in its wording, but also they just say it over and over and over. And that's not the kind of repetition we're looking for at all, but rather this intentional, paralleled, rhythmic type of repetition. Simile is another one when you compare one thing that is familiar to your listener to maybe something that they're not as familiar with, or compare it to something that brings up, again, some of that emotion. So again, Warren Buffett, shareholders who lost money were like small birds who strayed into a badminton game. They were bloodied and confused. Now, of course, shareholders weren't actually bloodied and confused. Well, maybe confused, but they aren't actually birdies or birds in a badminton game. But that language is so evocative that you were likely to smile a little bit when he said that, even if you were feeling frustrated, upset, or concerned about the state of the market. This is one of my favorite examples of metaphor. Metaphor, again, being one of those comparative sticky language devices. This one was used by a gentleman named Art Silverman. And Art was the communications director for a nonprofit agency that is designed to give information to the public about nutrition and other health issues. So Art was tasked with communicating to the American public how very unhealthy movie theater popcorn was. Now, for some of you from the States, you know that, and maybe this is the case around the world, eating popcorn at the movie theater is just a part of the experience. Like we don't go to the theater just watch the movie, we go to eat our popcorn. And it's covered in butter, and it has a tremendous amount of saturated fat. In fact, it has more saturated fat, 36 grams, than you're supposed to have all day long, which I think the US daily recommended allowance is like 20 grams of saturated fat for the entire day. So Art has to convince us, and this has to be that we need to quit eating this very unhealthy movie popcorn. So he could have come in with a PowerPoint slide and some bar charts, right? And he could have said, hey, here's a bar that is 20 grams of saturated fat, and that's what you're supposed to have a day. And boom, here's the second bar on the graph. This is 36 grams. This is what a bucket of popcorn has. He could show me PowerPoint graphs all day long, and I think I'm still eating my popcorn when I go to the theater, right? So instead, what he did was he came in, ladies and gentlemen of the press, thank you for being here. And then he just says that, movie popcorn is very unhealthy. And then almost wordlessly, he gets out and from underneath the table and sits it on top of the table, a plate with bacon and eggs. And then he reaches down and he gets out more food. And from a fast food bag, he pulls out a sack. He pulls out a hamburger and some fries. And he reaches under the table again and he gets a steak and a potato with butter and sour cream on it. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, press, you friends, you could eat all of this and still have consumed fewer grams of saturated fat than in one large container of movie popcorn. Well, the press went crazy. He ended the press conference there. They went nuts. They ran headlines like lights, camera, cholesterol, and movie popcorn gets an X rating. So they were playful with it. But what was more interesting was that the movie popcorn sales in the next quarter plummeted. And so much so, in fact, that three of the major theater outlets changed the type of oil that they were cooking the popcorn in, which was largely the culprit of all of this saturated fat. So Art Silverman changed a heart-driven and emotionally connected behavior with a metaphor. I love that power of language that could happen. So maybe you want to use a metaphor to convince people of whatever it is you're working with. This next clip is Matt Weinstein. Matt was the president of the American Speakers Association for years, and he's telling us a story about a rather bleak time in his life. It's part of a larger speech. I'm just going to show you about 3-4 minutes of the clip. But do consider going out onto the web and finding Matt Weinstein's full speech to see this all in action. But I think you're going to see all three of these emotion, these pathos. Remember, pathos is a building emotion. You're going to see him tap common values with people in the room. He's going to be talking about things like vacations and working hard and feeling fear, all kinds of things that we all can resonate with. So common values are tapped. He definitely uses sticky language, and he shows his emotion to evoke emotion of the people in the room. So let's watch Matt for a few minutes. And as we're doing that, get some ideas of which of these devices might you be willing to use in upcoming influential conversations you have. Here's Matt.
I went on vacation in Antarctica. On this ship, the academic Yuffie, a Russian icebreaker, and it was an incredible voyage. Gorgeous icebergs like floating works of art and penguins running around all over the place and just spectacular scenery. And about halfway through the trip, I got a page to go up to the bridge for a satellite phone call. And I thought I knew what this is about. Before I left on the trip, I had been working with a speakers bureau on a series of dates, and they were supposed to call me if they needed my final approval on the deal. So I went kind of running up towards the bridge, up this steep flight of stairs, because I knew these satellite phone calls were $10 a minute. And at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of cool, doing business in Antarctica. But when I pick up the phone, it's not the speakers bureau. It was, in fact, my wife, Janine. And she said a few words to me that just totally turned my world upside down. She said to me, Bernie Madoff's been arrested. His entire fund is a complete scam. And what she didn't have to say, but which both of us knew very well in that moment, was we had just lost our entire life savings. I felt really sick inside. Janine and I had both started out with nothing, worked really hard for 30 years, built up our retirement fund, given it over to Bernie Madoff to invest. He was the former chairman of the NASDAQ. What could be safer than that? And it was gone, just like that. Turned out Bernie Madoff stole $65 billion. Not all of it was mine, however. But it turned out to be the biggest financial scam in history, totally dwarfing anything like Enron or WorldCom. We both were really anxious about the future. We didn't know if we could afford to keep living in our house. Just everything was up in the air. And after a few minutes, one of us had the presence of mind to say to the other one, you know what? We are no longer the kind of people who can afford to talk on the satellite telephone. at $10 a minute. So we hung up. And as soon as I hung up, just a wave of fear washed over me. You know, wherever I've traveled in the world, I've always been able to get home during an emergency, but this was Antarctica. There was no way to get home. Now, I did have some good friends on the ship, and of course I told them what was going on, and they were incredibly supportive. But you know what? They were on vacation. I was thinking about Bernie Madoff 24/7, and they didn't want to be hearing Madoff, Madoff, Madoff all the time. Now, 2 or 3 times a day, we did get to go to shore in these rubber Zodiac boats. And I thought, okay, at least I can go out in nature. I can go see this beauty. It's going to really help me forget about what's going on. But that didn't really work out. Because everywhere I went, all I could see was Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. Show me the money! As one of my friends later said, Matt finally traveled to the South Pole just in time to see his investments go even further south. Now, you don't need to have invested with Bernie Madoff to be feeling the pinch of the current economic downturn.
We'll stop there with Matt, but did you see some of those examples of how he shows his own emotion, how he has tapped into the values that everybody probably has some experience with? He's got that sticky languages. That's great. Jay's got his example of his influential attempt in our chat, and anybody else that wants to share, please do. Jay is on the market here, so a lot of influencing, and hopefully some of these techniques to build emotional appeal will help you, Jay. So now I'm curious, in the chat, or in the comment section or the chat, let us know which ones of these sticky language devices that we've talked about today might be interesting to you. Metaphor, would you try it? Would you try simile? Would you try rhythmic repetition? Would you try chiasmus, alliteration, vivid word choice, or concrete examples? Which one seems most interesting or appealing to you? I'll let you put that in our comments section. And if you're thinking, well, I like the idea of chiasmus, it was kind of catchy, or I like alliteration, it appeals to me, but I'm not really sure how I would come up with an alliterative example or a chiasmic example. This is where I think you might find your AI writing assistant helpful if you're using ChatGPT or Copilot or Bing's piece. Maybe type in, this is, I'm trying to communicate this particular idea and give a short summary of the idea. I would like to use chiasmus, or I'd like to use alliteration to name this plan or to name my idea so that it's sticky or that it's more memorable. And what I have found with ChatGPT, the one I typically use, is that I don't get anything that I love well enough to actually use it, but I get some great ideas from it that allow me to springboard and get to an idea that I actually would use. So I haven't found it to be effective enough yet to just actually go, oh yeah, this is it, this is great. But it's a good brainstorming buddy for me as far as writing goes right now. So yeah, so which ones of these are you curious about? Which ones might you try to use? I'd love to know. Now, I want to share how I teach all of these sticky devices and a tip that you could use to practice yourself or to have people on your team practice using language that really sticks with people. So this is the plus tip for trainers or coaches. So I'm here in Bloomington, Indiana, and I have my students or my coaching clients, I say, introduce a celebrity to the Bloomington community. And so this is one of the local Bloomington theaters here. And I say, use at least 2 rhetorical devices. So they have to use maybe chiasmus and alliteration, or maybe they choose rhythmic repetition and a concrete example. And it's amazing. I give people only about a minute or 2 minutes to prep. And then they come off and they get to pick whatever celebrity they want. So it's someone they know enough about that they have some facts to work with. It's amazing to me how smart and creative these quick presentations are when they then introduce the celebrity and integrate some of these sticky devices. So that's a great tip I hope you'll find useful or helpful to you if you need to teach these skills to anybody else. That is what we have for you today. Lots of great tips, I hope, that you can put to work. Remember, tap common values, use sticky language, and show your emotion to evoke emotion. Those are 3 ways that you can increase the effectiveness with which you communicate, especially in influential types of moments. Next month, we have the brilliant Dr. Gemma Lee Roberts with us. We're continuing our story theme, but I realized a lot of us want to be able to tell our own story, either because we're in a job search or a promotion search and we're going to be interviewed where we need to tell our story, or because we're leaders and we want those that are on our teams to understand our own leadership philosophy. And so when that's the case, we need to be able to tell our leadership story, why we lead the way that we lead. Other times our stories are maybe about how we interact with customers or clients. But for any of these types of stories, we have to know ourselves to be able to tell our best story. And Dr. Roberts has done some incredible work in the area of self-awareness. It dovetails nicely with some of the work that I've done around emotional intelligence and communicating with emotional intelligence, one of the courses I have in the LinkedIn Learning Library. And so Gemma will be here to talk us through how we get to know ourselves. How do we increase our self-awareness enough that we can then tell our best stories in whatever setting that we're called to do that in. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful week and keep learning.